In the pounding rain, a powerless boy lies collapsed, told that people like him could never wield true power, as the world abandons him to the gutter. Under the same merciless downpour, he curls on the ground while distant figures close in, his suffering dismissed as if it were an unbreakable law of nature. Bootsteps halt before him as a man pants that he finally caught the thief, spitting that the kid has some nerve stealing from them. The battered boy recoils on the slick stones while two men loom over him, one snarling and branding him a filthy little street rat. Bruised and trembling, the boy stares up in shocked silence, his wide eyes saying what his lips cannot. Kicks crash down from all sides as the men shout that today he will learn his lesson and even jostle each other to land their own brutal hit. From high above the alley, their silhouettes close in while narration admits his first failure as a thief and his grim readiness to die, and the air turns heavier. One man scowls, demanding what that look is about, while another barks if the boy has a problem, pressing him to submit. Looking up at them, the boy admits in narration that they are right, that hunger drove him to theft and left him ready to die. A stark declaration cuts through the void. This world, he realizes, is mercilessly unjust. With rage exploding through his frail body, the boy suddenly surges up from the ground, refusing to stay broken any longer. He ends up slumped between his oppressors again as narration contrasts his deadly orphan life with the safe, comfortable existence others enjoy. Rain streaks over a noble's decorated chest as text explains that people born with such badges are the blessed nobles. From his place in the puddles, the boy endures insults of filthy peasant, while remembering a life of garbage and endless hunger that nobles could never grasp. One attacker lunges forward with murderous force, screaming for the boy to die. Stones tumble midair as the boy's thoughts echo that he had resigned himself to death, only to suddenly question if this is really the end. Standing inside a glowing magic circle, he braces himself and admits he is finished with losing. Rain mixes with his tears as he clenches his teeth and vows that there will be no more running. Energy erupts around him, hurling his tormentors back as he declares he will never again flee from this cruel world, and the pressure shows. As the men scream in panic, the boy sits stunned in the spell's center while they cry out in terror, wondering if this impossible power is magic and how such a brat could wield it. The stunned noble stares at the boy's glowing circle and sputters that only the noble class should wield such authority. The bearded man gapes in the rain, choking out a fearful half-question as he begins to suspect the impossible truth about the boy. Soaked and shaking, the boy hears them mutter about cursed bloodlines and forbidden magic, while one admits rumors of commoners suddenly awakening such power. His eyes widen in horror as he recalls a grotesque, formless thing and realizes the legend he dismissed as absurd might actually be real. As he turns to flee, one of the men shouts after him in panic, ordering him to stop even as the boy's bare feet pound the slick stones. Gasping raggedly under the rain, he runs until his throat burns, and every breath sounds like a desperate sob. Driven by a nameless dread that capture means certain death, he sprints into the night with nothing but terror pushing his exhausted body. With wild eyes and a torn shirt, he admits he has no destination and simply hurls himself forward, running blindly through darkness. Time blurs into a frantic chase, day after day, as he bolts down alleys with faceless pursuers always closing in behind him, and the tension does not ease. Wrapped in a tattered cloak, he staggers along cold stone corridors, the words day after day echoing his endless, lonely flight. Bare feet scrape raw on the ground while his breath steams white, every step in this day after day march edging him closer to collapse. Snow now blankets the streets where ordinary people stroll peacefully, unaware of the fugitive child vanishing between their neat houses. At the mouth of a narrow alley, townsfolk pass by as the cloaked boy slumps ignored in the shadows, freezing inches from their careless warmth. His hooded gaze dulls while snowflakes melt on his lashes, and narration admits that his vision is slowly fading away. The sky tilts above him in a blur of falling snow as his thoughts thicken into a heavy, dangerous haze. In that dimming world, one of his eyes snaps wide with grim recognition as he realizes this is the very moment everything will change. Out of the blackness, a calm, unfamiliar voice remarks that he looks pitiful, its casual tone cutting through his drifting consciousness. A fur-collared stranger stands over the huddled boy in the snow, his presence both sheltering and ominously unreadable. The boy, half-lidded and numb beneath his hood, mutters a cold diagnosis of broken ribs, forcing the words out through clenched pain. Grinning with unsettling ease, the man clinically lists malnourishment and severe frostbite, while the boy silently wonders who this disturbingly perceptive stranger really is. The old man's mouth curls under his mustache as he calmly tells the boy he has two options, and that the choice is his. From above, the stranger offers a brutal fork in the snow: die in the gutter like a dog, or follow him and live as a killer. Facing the hooded wreck, he repeats the word killer, while the boy silently admits he still cannot grasp what that terrifying label means. The boy's deadened eyes track the outstretched hand as a single hesitant but hangs between life and the cold stones. With his gloved palm still extended, the man studies him, and the boy narrates that he knew staying under that winter sky meant something worse than pain. The boy lifts his shaking hand toward that offer, certain that if he stayed slumped there he would never rise again. Fingers finally touch as the boy accepts the perilous bargain that might save him or damn him. In the reflection of his eye, the man is captured like a binding contract, as a faint voice concedes that they now have a deal, and the moment locks in place. The fur-collared stranger leans in with a sharp smile and casually asks the half-frozen child for his name. While the boy hacks and wheezes on the pavement, narration notes the man's cruel streak in requesting a name from a throat that can barely speak. Clenching his fist and forcing air through shredded lungs, the boy strains to spit out the broken syllables of Arus. The answer collapses with him as he falls into the man's arms, the older figure muttering a light whoops that barely masks the weight of the moment. In the narrow, snow-choked alley, the man sits cradling the unconscious child and declares without ceremony that from this day forward the boy is his son. Pressed against the man's chest and loosely wrapped in his coat, the boy drifts into exhausted sleep while narration fixes this as the day 10 years passed. The old man's profile softens against the snowfall as the grown narrator admits he would have died on that street if this stranger had not found him. Bootsteps hammer along the same stone path years later, each stride dragging the story into a new, breathless present. The alley stretches bright and tight around a running figure as narration says those distant memories now lead straight into today. A young man in a vest spins back in terror, sweating and shouting for something unseen to stay away as panic tears through his composure. Far behind him on a slanted field of darkness, a gunman levels his weapon while the fleeing man screams a desperate, elongated no. Mid-sprint, the young man's body jerks as a bullet tears into his side, freezing his escape in a single, shattering instant. A masked figure in a hood levels a smoking gun and coldly introduces himself as Arus Wilzard, a sorcerer who haunts the city's shadows. While his latest victim sprawls bleeding on the cobblestones, his detached narration promises he will appear wherever blood and smoke choke the air, uncaring of time or place, and the city feels smaller. Two bystanders stare up in sweat-soaked disbelief, one babbling that someone should stop the attacker while the other wonders if this inhuman movement is some cruel joke. An unseen blow slams into them both, wrenching agonized cries from their mouths as their bodies whip backward. Against a black void, his voice lays out the old man's gift with chilling simplicity: obey orders and slaughter strangers. A bleak cityscape spreads under the dusk as narration brands at Parakinos, the Black City. Beside a spinning revolver, text explains that humanity's vilest urges coil through this place, forcing the rulers to hire a nameless guild of sorcerers to keep order. A sweating man skids backward across the floor, then forces a crooked smile while admitting it is hard to accept the nightmare closing in. Gregory Scanner straightens with a strained grin, confessing he never thought he would be cornered so fast as narration exposes him as a noble tied to the slave trade. The camera tightens on his sly, sweating face while text reveals a history of arrests dodged through fat bribes, painting him as a man who always slithered past judgment. From Gregory's shoulder we see Arus advancing, and the narration deems this corrupt noble more than worthy of becoming the organization's person of interest, as the stakes sharpen. A lone speech bubble hangs in empty space, its simple claim "I know about you" suddenly stripping away Gregory's composure. Arus looms in his hooded coat as Gregory nervously identifies him as the whispered nightmare known as the Night Hawk. Across the wrecked office, Gregory lounges on his sofa and talks almost admiringly, calling Arus fast, terrifying, and silent, the kind who vanishes without a trace once the killing is done. A close-up of Arus's masked eyes accompanies Gregory's final label for him, the assassin who carries a royal warrant. Looking down on the room, Arus notes coolly that he dislikes that title, insisting a true assassin should remain nameless, and that having a reputation still makes him a rookie. Gregory's hand lifts in a fatalistic gesture as he mutters that the Night Hawk's appearance means his stupid streak of luck has finally ended. Spreading his arms like a man welcoming execution, Gregory urges Arus to hurry up and finish him, boasting that he has heard this killer can end lives in an instant. Seen from behind, Arus silently observes Gregory's theatrics and thinks to himself that the noble is really laying it on thick. As he studies the strangely unguarded room, Arus admits a creeping unease, wondering why a noble marked for assassination sits here without any visible security. Arus stiffens in the shattered room, realizing with a jolt that Gregory has deliberately herded him into this trap, and his instincts flare. Hidden gunmen spring from their perches around the barrels, shouting that they will never let the intruder leave alive. Gregory's face twists from fury to glee as he whips out a pistol, hurling insults and a snarled wish for Eris's death. Behind his mask, Aris coolly notes that the noble kept guards in ambush, while Gregory answers with a smug, careless yup. In a blur of motion, Aris seizes one attacker midair and swings him like dead weight, turning their ambush into chaos. He surges forward through the hail of bullets, invoking the school of enhancement as power floods his body. With eyes like sharpened steel, he calls out Steelskin and lets the incoming rounds shatter harmlessly against his hardened flesh. The closest henchmen scream and choke as unseen strikes crush their throats, their surprise dying on their lips. Gregory's remaining thug stares in cold sweat as narration asserts that no flashy sorcery is needed to end a human life. From the far side of the ravaged warehouse, Gregory tracks Aris and thinks 9mm of lead should still be enough to finish him. Aris calmly examines the captured handgun, telling the shaken noble that every careful calculation has just been wiped away. His boot taps forward, and his mouth curls in faint disappointment as he murmurs that this outcome is a shame. Gregory forces out a trembling laugh, cursing and demanding to know how his scheme failed while panicked footsteps echo. Clutching the sofa for support, he staggers upright with a strained groan as Aris closes in. Driven to raw desperation, Gregory roars "damn it" and levels his gun in one last frantic bid to turn the tables. His eye widens around the clicking trigger as he insists that any assassin felled by such a trap could never have lasted 10 years in the underworld. Staring up at the boy's poised gun, Gregory stammers in disbelief that this terrifying nighthawk is nothing more than a brat, and his pride cracks. Bloodied and slumped, he listens numbly as narration calls magic a sacred secret of the world, reserved for chosen bloodlines alone. Aris turns his back, while the text reminds him that those born without that blessing are never meant to touch such power. Facing Gregory head-on, Aris declares that one lineage breaks that rule, the cursed bloodline that stands as the lone exception. An empty alley echoes with the unseen gunshot that quietly announces the mission's grim completion, and the air settles heavy. Aris stands over the sprawled corpse, casually murmuring "well then," as if the killing were a minor chore and nothing more. With his gaze lowered and jaw tight, he notes that the job is finished and hints that only one final task remains before he can truly leave. Before he can move, a figure explodes into the room with a roaring full frontal rush, shattering the floor between them in a shower of debris. Grinning and pounding his chest, the shirtless newcomer boldly introduces himself as Sag Buffalo, backup from the Sorcerer's Guild who clearly enjoys the entrance. A knife-wielding man lunges in from behind as a dispassionate voice cuts through the air, saying there is no need for that help in this already finished job. Aris's calm face hardens as he remarks that letting any survivors chase them later would only be an annoying burden waiting to happen. Sag wilts under the order as Aris flatly declares they are leaving, his silence trailing like unfinished protest that never gets voiced. Night settles over the crowded rooftops of Parakinos, the black city brooding beneath a polluted sky that swallows the stars. Along a sloping street crammed with silhouettes, narration says the tireless crowds have earned this place the second name of the nightless city, and the title sticks. Amid the throng, faceless passers-by drift past while the text strips them of identity, insisting race, nation, age, and gender mean nothing here where survival is all. A shadowy figure slips over a wall, as narration claims that in this blackened city, anyone, no matter how stained, can carve out a living if they dare. Aris sprints across the rooftops with Sag leaping after him, both racing the wind as if hunted by the city itself, and the tension does not ease. While they bound forward, Sag shouts that something has been gnawing at him, and Aris tersely demands to know what it is this time without slowing. From behind, Sag questions why Aris still clings to that toy gun, instead of simply erasing targets with the magic that should make killing effortless. The night sky streaks by as Sag scoffs that such a weapon must be little more than scrap to a sorcerer who calls it a mere toy. Aris runs on and concedes that magic is convenient, explaining that with only one's body and some training it can outmatch any firearm in raw power. Sag pants at his side and objects that every spell leaves a trace, asking what Aris really means by treating that as a problem that matters. Over a glowing magic circle, Aris explains that magical energy is concentrated personal data and coldly states he prefers to leave as little of himself behind as possible. As Sag bounds after him, Aris adds that depending on magic for assassinations is outdated anyway, hinting that modern sorcerer-killing research has taken a far deadlier turn, and the pressure shows. The beaded youth blinks in surprise as an ominous presence arrives right on cue, prickling at his nerves. He sprints toward the oncoming flock, teeth clenched as the air itself howls around him like a warning. Blade-like metal birds scream down from the sky, turning the open air into a glittering, whirling, killing field. He recoils in panic at the mechanical swarm, while Aris coolly explains it is a cutting-edge tracking weapon that hunts magic without mercy. As Booted steps close in, Aris dryly guesses the device simply locked onto Saj's leaking magical energy, which Saj admits he barely understands himself. Grinning with reckless bravado, Saj whips up his finger gun and claims he just needs to blast the thing out of the sky and be done with it. He hurls a blazing shot upward with a roar, betting everything on his burning bullet in one glorious gamble. Aris watches the display and, half impressed, judges that such power suits a prodigy who entered the guild so young and untested. The steel birds veer aside at the last instant, leaving Saj shouting in disbelief that even that attack was dodged like nothing. Aris explains with maddening calm that the weapon senses their magic and makes a clean hit impossible, while Saj howls in frustration at how they are supposed to touch it at all. Watching the circling flock, Aris admits that mindless aggression will never work against them, no matter how loud the attack. His gaze narrows in profile as he concludes that the fastest solution demands something far simpler and more precise. He stares up with eerie composure and declares they will turn the enemy's own abilities back on itself, leaving Saj to whisper in shaken awe and ask what he really is. His pistol bucks again and again as he calls this cold, relentless gunfire the most dependable tactic in his hands. Finger on the trigger, he estimates 100 meters to the target, calculating with detached precision that borders on mechanical. 2 spinning rounds streak outward, laden with magic, as his narration brands them the first stage of his trap taking shape midair. The enchanted bullets herd the metal birds into a tighter path, placing them exactly where he wants them for the next step. With one unblinking eye, he notes that the remaining 6 rounds are ordinary bullets meant purely to kill. He analyzes the weapon coldly, stating that while it can slip past any magic, beyond that it is nothing more than a mindless drone following patterns. Saj looks up in alarm as multiple fiery orbs blossom overhead, realizing a new, deadlier barrage is about to fall on them. Saj's voice cracks in awed disbelief as he stares up and mutters that all 6 were hit at once with brutal accuracy. An unreadable eye narrows as Aris coolly asks for judgment on his ruthless display, almost inviting critique. Holstering his pistol with detached poise, Aris remarks that even these lowly guns earn their place once the target is eliminated and silence returns. Narration shifts to a quiet alley where the adventurer's tavern Yggdrasil hides as a favored haunt of guild members looking to forget. Inside the bustling tavern, a smiling waitress shouts a warm welcome while calling out that Aris nailed his latest job without a hitch. Aris notes flatly that his companion is already drunk as the older man slurs praise about the kid's recent top form work. Watching his stumbling senior rave that even the brass will be thrilled with today's kill, Aris silently concludes the man is absolutely wasted beyond saving. The red-faced drunkard roars for another drink for the boy as narration grimly identifies him as Genos Wilzard, Aris's father in name only. Aris sits stiffly beside him, while narration explains that this slovenly liaison is the crucial link between their killer's guild and the government. From across the counter, others watch as Genos badgers Aris to drink with him, and narration reveals the man once worked as the infamous assassin Golden Lion before joining this organization. Side by side on a bench, Genos reminds him that a full decade has passed since the boy first stepped into the field. Genos quietly asks if he can still count his victims, while Aris admits from the shadows that he lost track long ago and stopped trying. Coffee ripples in its cup as Genos lists nobles, royals, mages, and holy knights among the many Aris has slain over those 10 relentless years. Walking away from the bar, Aris curtly cuts through Genos's rambling to demand the next assignment, while the older man sheepishly notes he sometimes cleaned up kills himself. With a weary grin, Genos confesses he is thinking of laying off jobs for a while, letting the unfinished actually hang heavy between them like a warning. Aris's expression falters as Genos suddenly declares that instead of more killings, the boy will be sent to school, and the air turns heavier. Stunned, Aris asks if he really means him, while Genos snaps back that of course he does and wonders if the kid is secretly drunk too. A view of the cramped rooftops accompanies Genos's sober explanation that in this city, nothing secures survival like a sorcerer's qualifications and the credibility nobles demand. Genos twists the knife by noting that Saj has already earned his license, leaving Aris to mutter that the comparison hurts, while his guardian presses the point without mercy. Staring off with cool resignation, Aris observes that the higher-ups clearly trust him even less than they trust Saj. Genos's tired smile tightens as he reminds Aris that ever since the incident 3 years ago, work has been drying up for their kind. A stark emblem of antlers and triangles looms while narration brands reverse recrown as the Black City's largest anti-government force. Black splatters tear across the page as the text insists that the grudges born 3 years ago still claw at countless hearts and refuse to fade. peaceful streets and chatting townsfolk sit under narration that reverse her crown was slowly erased after the incident, supposedly making the Black City safer. Genos closes his eyes in smug contentment as he claims the world itself is finally inching toward peace. Aris stands by the counter as Genos warns that at this pace an unlicensed sorcerer like him might soon have no way to survive at all. Aris's hand rests on the table while he quietly notes he is 15 now and that ordinary kids his age would already be in school. Genos scowls over his drink and spits out a harsh refusal, rejecting the idea on instinct like a bad joke. Arus meets his gaze with a faint challenge and wonders aloud what would happen if refusal were his own answer. Genos taps his temple with a crooked grin and coldly overrules him, saying orders leave the boy no right to say no. With eyes half shut, Aris reflects that in this organization the cruel flaw is simple. Commands are absolute and inescapable. Forcing a small smile, Arus agrees and reaches forward, ready to comply as he suggests they get started and move things along. He lays a hand on an older patron's shoulder, his movement calm even as the man's back wavers with drunken weight. The flushed stranger leans in with bleary eyes, hiccuping as he calls the boy Sonny, and slurs a question about his drink. Aris turns with a muted start while Genos watches from behind, and he wryly thinks that beyond his old man he keeps attracting drunks today. The young waitress approaches with a nervous blush and stammer, begging the drunk not to bother other customers. The man explodes in offended rage, shouting that she is calling him a nuisance as she shrieks in fear at his sudden roar. Her body jolts and a hand grabs her shoulder, sending her tray flying as food scatters through the air in a messy arc. Aris appears at her side, steadying her trembling frame while his calm gaze fixes on the unfolding chaos before him. From above the rattled crowd, the drunk howls why everyone despises him, raging that wherever he goes nobles sneer at him for being a mere commoner. The drunk, face twisted with hurt pride, rails at the waitress for treating a fellow commoner like trash unworthy of service. His mouth stretches in a furious roar as he demands recognition as a paying customer and screams for more booze like a battle cry. Aris watches with cool detachment while narration frames the man as just another worker seething over his lowly status among nobles. Past superiors loom in memory as narration cuts in like a verdict that this world itself is rigged and unfair from the start. Boots step forward with quiet resolve while narration concedes understanding of that resentment yet hints at a hard limit to what it can excuse. The drunk explodes again, shrieking for everyone to back off as his frustration boils over into raw hostility aimed at anyone near. Genos's weary gaze and Aris's calm profile close in as narration warns that pain gives no right to lash out at strangers. Aris exhales a thin cloud of breath and, almost bored, guesses this will just be another order handed down from above. Genos tugs his ear with a guilty look as he begins to frame their grim duty as something bigger than themselves in this fragile city. Floating words cut in like a sentence, declaring that their work exists solely to keep this restless city from falling apart. The drunk lunges with another howl, his rage now a physical threat barreling toward the room like a thrown weapon. Aris raises his arm with unhurried precision, intercepting the swinging bottle and shattering it mid-strike. Glass and liquor burst through the air as Aris sweeps the man's legs, sending him sprawling in stunned confusion that kills his momentum. In a blink, Aris pins him face down, expression flat as the once raging man is crushed under effortless technique. Sweat beads down Aris's cheek as a distant command echoes to put the nuisance on the floor where he can do no harm. His eye narrows with bitter fatigue while a sardonic voice congratulates him on yet another bout of unpaid overtime. Genos leans over a spread of documents, casually telling him to review the stack of papers once this mess is over. With a lopsided grin, Genos reveals the pages are all potential schools, where the killer child might actually get in. Aris looks aside, offers a stiff thanks for the meal, and lets unspoken thoughts hang between them like smoke. The waitress bows in flustered gratitude while narration quietly marvels at how unexpectedly kind this lethal boy has turned out to be. Aris trudges through the tavern with his new uniform as Genos's offhand worry clashes with his stunned thought that he is seriously being sent to school now, and the air feels unreal. A crest-stamped application blurs before his eyes while he admits the paperwork is making his head pound and his patience thin. Alone in his bare room with birds chirping outside, he stands stiffly before the desk, bracing himself to put on the unfamiliar role that now waits. He slides into the academy jacket, his assassin's hands fumbling slightly as he dresses up like someone he has never been and never planned to be. His eye tightens in silent disbelief as he remembers Genos proudly insisting he take the handmade uniform and treat it with care. Genos cackles with booze-flushed pride, calling him a convincing noble while the boy's silence makes the compliment sting like a bad joke that sticks. Cherry blossoms frame the city as he recalls that 2 months have crawled by since his old man ordered him into a school life that feels alien. The sprawling royal capital of Manga stretches beneath the clock tower, its size pressing down like the stage for a role he must fake and cannot refuse. Walking through the capital's suburb streets in crisp uniform, he notes with cool detachment that this is where his double life officially begins and the tension does not ease. The grand facade of the Royal Academy of Magic looms over the trees, promising prestige that does not match the killer standing at its gate. His shoe steps past a fallen petal as he calmly decides on this academy, weighing the choice like a mission with two clear objectives. He eyes the main building while calculating costs, noting that dirt-cheap tuition hides a system funded by others' taxes and quiet resentment. Nervous rich youths chatter about passing the exam, while a wry inner voice points out the irony of a taxpayer-funded playground for the wealthy. From above, the campus reveals its perfect position between glittering capital and grim slums, a convenient crossroads for both his studies and his shadows. Two girls notice him and call out, while narration coolly remarks that perks like these naturally lure in hordes of hopeful students every year. Arusa's gaze sharpens as whispers single out the son of the Louis Buster family, the false noble mask settling heavier on his face. Groups of well-dressed heirs brag that nearly every major name has gathered here, the Academy's prestige wrapping them in smug entitlement they barely try to hide. Seen from a distance, Arus walks almost alone among clusters of chatting aristocrats, thinking bitterly that he is the only non-noble in sight. His eyes track the glittering medals beneath starched collars, silently measuring how easily nobles flaunt their status while commoners walk bare. While someone snaps, "How dare you?" behind him, Arus listens to the unspoken rule that only nobles hide their medals to slum with the masses, and those ones usually stink of the underworld he knows too well. Arus watches from behind as a crowd turns on a lone girl, their leader sneering that a lowly one-star dares talk back. His eyes narrow as he weighs the rising tension, privately wishing he did not have to jump into a fight on day one. While a blonde noble rants about sacred academy grounds and garbage, Arus drifts at the edge, the insulted girl standing her ground. In the plaza's center, she shouts that barring one stars is nowhere in the rules, her defiance echoing through the ring of onlookers. The pompous officer jabs at his sword and yells that the books say nothing of it, sweat and outrage mixing on his face. Facing him with flushed cheeks and clenched fists, the girl demands they think about why the noble class even exists. Arms spread like a preacher, the blonde proclaims 3 stars the elite and 2 stars the comfortable middle, basking in his own hierarchy. Her expression tightens as he spits that 1 stars like her are landless, worthless nobles at the very bottom. His mouth twists in glee as he boasts that everyone gathered here is at least a 2 or 3 star, making her isolation complete. With a dark grin and a hand to his chest, he claims unwritten rules matter more than law, calling his arrogance noblesse oblige with absolute pride. Surrounded by jeering voices telling her to leave and know her place, the girl stiffens, shock and humiliation warring in her eyes. He looms close, ordering her to listen as he declares that in this world, stars decide everything. Laughing wide and cruel, he says fewer stars mean eternal inferiority, and mocks her upbringing as pitifully ignorant. Head bowed, she retreats into herself while he smirks, and a distant onlooker notes how completely she has shut down. Nearby, a worried blonde girl asks if something is wrong, drawing Arus's calm attention to the brewing cruelty. Blushing and fidgeting, she stammers that the bullied 1 star is actually an old friend of hers. Arus's profile hardens as he realizes the girl was targeted the instant she arrived, the pattern of abuse already clear. Across the courtyard, he watches the tiny standoff, and notes she is being toyed with by that egotistical blonde noble. His gaze turns cold as he thinks how high nobles always expect the world to bend to them, a flaw he knows too well. Before anyone intervenes, the blonde barks, "Hey, woman," and strikes her, the crack of the blow tearing a cry of pain from her lips. The blonde noble yanks her close as she begs him to stop, sneering that daring to defy a 3-star will cost her dearly. With a leering grin, he suggests her fate could change if she agreed to belong to him. Trembling and cornered, she forces a weak, horrified smile as he hints he might reconsider her crime. Watching with flat irritation, Arus notes how pathetic it is to hit on girls right before an exam. He strides forward while the blonde friend falters out a confused and his thoughts dismiss any trace of noblesse oblige. Cutting between them without haste, Arus asks the abuser to move, his calm presence cracking the tension. Shock ripples through bully, victims, and onlookers alike as his sudden intrusion explodes into a collective gasp. Arus turns his profile toward the chaos and coolly states he cannot spare time on some lover's spat, even as whispers notice his collar. The crowd stares, stunned, at the boy with the blank collar and murmurs that he carries no stars at all. As he walks through falling petals, nobles gawk and mutter in disbelief, wondering why a commoner has invaded their space. His eye sharpens, silently questioning whether someone like him is really such a rare spectacle here. He coolly fires back that packing this many nobles into one place seems far stranger to him. From above, a ring of uniforms tightens while someone repeats in disbelief that this boy truly has no stars at all, and the pressure shows. The blonde officer clicks his tongue, grumbling that today is disgraceful enough with one-star trash before a starless nobody appears. Barely containing his fury, he snarls that even a commoner now dares to level criticism at him. Pointing and shouting for the commoner to know his place, he demands to know what business Arus has here. Arus lifts his exam ticket and answers flatly that he is only here to sit the entrance test. The noble flinches, repeating the words in confusion as if no other motive could possibly exist. Around them, students whisper in disbelief, wondering if a commoner is actually allowed to take the exam at all. Narration drifts over the fluttering blossoms, conceding that their bewilderment is something he cannot entirely fault. The stately academy towers above the blossoms while narration coolly insists its entrance test welcomes all, regardless of class. As nobles shuffle behind him, murmured commentary reveals that despite the open policy, not a single commoner has ever passed. Close on his eyes, the words "a commoner" taking the exam circle like disbelief tightening around his resolve. The blonde noble's face contorts as he rages that this place is sacred and that he has never suffered such degrading shame. Arus tilts his head with bored composure, remarking that calling this humiliation only proves how pampered the noble's life has been. A hand seizes a hilt and rips the blade free as the furious order to prepare yourself turns threat into imminent violence. Sword leveled and mouth wide, the officer bellows that the commoner will learn to fear the overwhelming might of the noble class. The plaza splits into two lines as the mob howls for Arus to be expelled and punished for daring to defy nobility. Arus answers by calmly warning that brandishing a blade in the middle of the street is reckless, his tone chillingly casual. Teeth gritted, the noble snaps that he will not be ordered around by some nobody, irritation spilling past forced restraint. The sword carves across the cobblestones with a shriek as he hurls the slur commoner, like a weapon meant to cut deeper. Twisted in murderous rage, he screams that he will end the boy right here and now, spittle flying with the promise. Arus's body stays loose as he taunts whether the noble's legs are as pitifully weak as the rest of him. Lightning crackles around Arus's gaze as narration dismisses such empty threats as bluster without a shred of killing intent. Power flares while the noble roars durability enhancement, charging in with a magically reinforced strike meant to crush the insolent upstart. Holding the exam slip between glowing fingers, Arus dryly muses about the impressive paper quality these noble schools can afford. His cool eye judges that the attacker's grasp of magic still has a long way to go, the verdict slicing harsher than steel. Facing the stunned swordsman, Arus lifts the unscathed slip and needles that he had been promised an execution a moment ago. Sweat beads at the noble's eye as he hisses "You bastard," the first real tremor of fear cracking through his fury. In a blur of afterimages dodging each swing, Arus forces him to scream how much longer this mockery will drag on as his pride shreds in public. The girl stares wide-eyed at the clashing blows, whispering in disbelief as Lord Delux's attacks lose all meaning before her. Her eye trembles, confusion swirling around a lone figure reflected in its depths, as she admits she understands only one thing. Sitting stunned on the ground, she watches Arus glide past like a comet and realizes with awe and dread that this man stands unrivaled. Sweat dripping and breath ragged, Deluk curses through clenched teeth, torment gnawing at him as he wonders why he cannot touch his foe. Watching him strain, Arus notes that his opponent has raised his effort yet still reins himself in, puzzling over what fear keeps those blows so timid. With his eyes half-lidded in boredom, Arus decides this dragged-out match is pointless and silently resolves to end it. Deluk lurches back in panic, screaming as Arus rockets toward him in a single devastating rush that shreds his confidence. Arus's hand crackles with focused power as he calmly invokes the body-strengthening school, turning casual fingers into lethal weapons. In one blinding thrust, his glowing fingertips spear Deluk's chest, the proud noble's body arching as his vaunted strength shatters. Deluk howls and then crashes to the stones, while Arus lands lightly nearby, barely even looking winded by the public humiliation. Clutching his head and sputtering "Be bastard," Deluk gapes up in terror, demanding to know what impossible trick has been used on him. Arus only thinks that it was nothing more than a casual snap of his fingers, his detached calm deepening the insult. As Deluk lies rigid and panicked, shouting that he cannot move, Arus strolls toward him under the stunned stares of the surrounding nobles. Expression cool, Arus explains he merely numbed the man's semicircular canals and assures him the helplessness will fade soon. The watching students freeze in speechless shock, fear and fascination warring on their faces as they realize how effortlessly the bully was broken. Arus's shoes tap away across the cobblestones while he muses that one nuisance has been neatly removed from his path, and the air turns heavier. Without looking back at the girl on the ground, he says there is no reason to stay any longer, his indifference cutting sharper than magic. She scrambles up with a desperate cry, arm outstretched as she begs him to wait, afraid to let her silent savior walk away. From high above, the plaza stretches between them like a gulf, her wordless hesitation hanging in the air as he keeps moving. Striding past the shaken crowd, Arus meets the world with a quiet, unwavering gaze, marking this ruthless display as his true arrival at the Royal Academy of Magic. From high above the sprawling field, she quietly notes that this vast, intimidating expanse will decide their worth. Amid the awed crowd, Arus stands calm, remarking that an absurd amount of land has been sacrificed just to grind them down. Tilting his head against the sky, he politely asks for a moment of her time, curiosity hiding the weight of his reputation. Blushing yet composed, the twin-tailed girl steps forward, nervously confirming that he is the troublemaker from the school gates. Seeing him below, she hesitates on the ledge and calls out a cautious offer of help, still unsure how close she dares approach. With a practiced, grateful smile, she introduces herself as Rina and insists she only came to repay the debt from earlier. Flustered by his gaze, she stammers and wonders aloud if they have met before, or if her churning thoughts are fooling her. Waving off the gratitude, Arus laughs lightly and claims he merely made an easier target, trying to strip the charged moment of weight. Rina gestures to the fidgeting girl beside her, about to drag her into the conversation before nerves can make her bolt. The short-haired girl brightens, cheerfully greeting him as Rua and declaring herself Rina's old friend to break the lingering tension. Leaning in with open curiosity, Rua asks if she may know his name, treating the feared commoner like any other boy. He answers simply as Arus, his straightforward tone cutting through their expectations of some grander title. He studies the two girls and asks if they truly are only one-star nobles, measuring their quiet pride against the ranks. Rua giggles with a touch of embarrassment, admitting that beneath their smiles, they were both secretly terrified. Rina's face turns serious as she confesses she doubted whether mere one-stars were even allowed to sit this merciless exam. Images of his stand against Diluc flash behind her words as she explains that watching him defy the nobles gave them courage. Crossing her arms and glancing away, Rina mutters that a commoner taking the entrance exam is almost unheard of, the statement half awe, half warning. Arus, unfazed, asks if being ranked as one-star cripples them in the upcoming trials, probing the invisible chains of the system. Both girls recoil with an exasperated shout, stunned that he can voice such an obvious disadvantage so casually. Rina points a finger and admits that of course it does, revealing that only a tiny handful of one-star nobles have ever survived these exams. Rina forces a wry smile as she admits they will have to unleash terrifying power just to scrape a passing grade, and the pressure shows. From the far end of the stone grounds, the lone proctor waits on his platform while examinees drift into uneasy formation below. A booming roar orders every last candidate to silence and marches them toward the central square like condemned troops. Ranks of students lock into rigid lines, the sheer number turning one man's voice into law over a sea of hopefuls. The mustached examiner introduces himself as Bubuhara, his stern gaze promising no mercy behind the polite title of proctor. One dark-haired boy listens stiffly as a distant speech blandly anticipates their future hard work, masking the threat of failure. Facing their backs from the steps, the official proclaims the academy a pure meritocracy, daring anyone weak to resent it. He coldly adds that such a place has no use for trivial written tests, making every clenched fist tighten further. Rina and the others listen as he declares their fate will hinge solely on two brutal practical trials. He gestures toward the looming structures and tells them to watch what he has prepared, anxiety rippling down the line. Targets rise across the field as his voice strips the rules bare. Strike them with magic and live, miss and be discarded. Arus tilts his head with a puzzled look when asked if it sounds simple, sensing a trap in the supposed ease. Bubuhara mechanically explains their three attempts while off to the side Arus wonders if mere impact is really all that matters. A trembling boy stares ahead in horror, unable to believe that merely hitting a target with magic could doom so many. Students protest that the mark sits absurdly far away, yet someone laughs that this cruel distance is exactly the Royal Academy's style. As the unmoving pillar fills his vision, Arus silently scoffs that real battles never offer such convenient, stationary prey. Dotted across the grounds, the gathered examinees tense, while Arus privately admits he cannot fathom how nobles think at all. A blazing projectile rips through the air as narration mocks how pitifully low the standard of this vaunted entrance exam truly is. Magic slams into the stone targets and bursts and chips, the impacts loud but nowhere near lethal in Arus's eyes. Candidates groan, cheer, and curse, some barely missing, others clearing the first stage, while Arus watches their frantic struggle without breaking a sweat. Arus and the nearby students lean in with uneasy curiosity, unable to grasp what strange magic is unfolding before them. As his feet rest on the chalk sigils, he coldly judges that spending 20 whole seconds on a magic circle would be suicide in a real battle. Staring ahead without emotion, he admits to himself that he had greatly overvalued his classmates' competence. He recalls how the underworld sorcerers of his childhood moved like lethal artisans, prized by powerful nobles who dealt in real bloodshed. While the sheltered examinees shout simple spells like fireball and ice arrow, he muses that their so-called combat skill may end at these childish tricks. Rina and Rua gape at the shattered stonework, awestruck and intimidated that girls their own age could unleash such destructive beauty. Watching them, Arus coolly concludes that only those two barely reach the level he would even call acceptable. The proctor smirks at his clipboard, praising the display yet lamenting with thinly veiled prejudice that such talent belongs to mere one-stars. As the final candidate steps forward and the examiner calls Arus, the air tightens around the boy whose very name now provokes the crowd. Bubuhara's face twists with hatred as he spits that this is the insolent commoner who defiled their academy with his presence. From above, the administrator strides beside him and curtly decrees that Arus will be allowed only a single attempt. The man then spells it out with ruthless clarity, saying that if Arus wants the next stage, he must pass this test in just one shot. Watching from a distance, nobles murmur that the administrator is severe, yet smugly frame this cruelty as their noble duty to discipline the upstart. Leering down, Bubuhara taunts that it still isn't too late for the boy to crawl away and forfeit. Alone before the distant pedestal, Arus answers that he will see it through, turning the vast empty field into his personal arena. Glancing aside, he coolly reasons that simply hitting the target would invite more petty torment, so something harsher is required. He sighs that he hates drawing attention because of his true occupation, yet resigns himself to causing a scene. Rua forces a nervous smile and murmurs that at this rate, they will all need something extreme just to scrape a pass. With eyes narrowing and hand poised, Arus decides he must flaunt overwhelming might, then unleashes his spell with a quiet fireball. An enormous blast erupts from his outstretched arm, the explosion swallowing the target and blowing apart any notion of a fair exam. Rua stares at the smoking crater and whispers that their painstaking circles feel pointless after that blast. Rina reels with wide eyes and a shaken what as the reality of his power crashes over her. Arus lowers his hand while stunned voices cry out that no magic circle ever appeared. From high above the ruined range, he walks back as panicked spectators argue whether that impossible explosion was really just a fireball. The cluster of boys gape toward him, one stammering about his feet while another urges them to look closer. Their eyes drop to the grass around his shoes as someone demands to know if anyone actually saw a magic circle. They choke out that incantationless magic should be impossible, dismissing it as some myth now walking in front of them. His calm gaze fills the frame while unseen narration brands his feat as magic without a circle, true incantationless sorcery. Arus stands over a faint sigil and privately insists it was only ordinary magic with an ordinary circle, nothing worthy of their hysteria. Text slices through a dark panel, revealing that his ordinary circle triggers in a ruthless tenth of a second. Watching in dread, inexperienced students realize that to them his speed makes it look like no circle existed at all, and the tension spikes. Bubuhara charges after him, roaring in outrage and demanding to know what in the world he thinks he is doing. The examiner's face distorts with fury as he accuses Arus of trickery, refusing to believe such power could be cast without a circle. A view of the battered target accompanies Arus's cool rebuttal that so long as the mark is hit, the method should not matter. Sweating and sneering, Bubuhara is silently judged as a noble obsessed with procedure over results. From high above, the man barks that Arus must use a proper magic circle this time, or be disqualified on the spot. Internal narration notes, with bitter irony, that this blustering man is actually demanding Arus construct a magic circle for him. As Arus steps toward the distant pedestal, he coldly resolves that, as an assassin, he will simply grant the client's request. A vast, intricate circle blooms at his feet, turning the open field into a blazing stage for his restrained obedience. His profile hardens in concentration as he explains to himself that he will begin by laying down a basic fireball circle as the core. Spectators gape from the sidelines, while narration coolly notes that the glowing circle at Arus's feet is the sort of simple pattern even novices memorize. As runes flare around him, he clinically describes stacking extra spells onto that basic circle, while distant officers demand maximum power and speed. A sweating boy points in alarm at the blazing sigils as unseen commands twist the magic into a deadly lance form. Circles multiply beneath Aris like a ritual field, while a panicked voice shrieks how enormous the summoned spear is becoming. With fragments of light orbiting him, Aris glances back over his shoulder and dryly asks if this monstrous weapon finally satisfies their demands. Staring across the vast, humming array, the examiner stutters that it has to be a bluff, insisting such a complex circle must misfire. Another official wipes his brow and mutters that this stubborn proctor refuses to back down no matter how far things escalate. Aris levels the spear and promises to demonstrate, invoking high-class magic with a calm that makes the air itself recoil. His eyes blaze as he hurls the spell named Gungnir, the world whitening under the spear's apocalyptic descent. The distant target is obliterated by a beam of force, stone and sky ripped apart along the line of his attack. The mustached examiner's face contorts between terror and awe, while another candidate jumps up, suspended between dread and thrilled disbelief. The camera pulls back to reveal a gouged landscape as a faint voice finishes its broken accusation of bluffing. Watching the shaken student struggle to sit up, Aris remarks that this level should suffice and coolly scolds the unseen authorities for courting casualties he barely prevented. Around the smoking trench, examinees whisper that no commoner should wield such magic, their shaken bodies proving how close they came to death. Sweat beads down Bubuhara's cheek as a voice calls to him as Mr. Examiner, snapping his stunned gaze forward. Towering over the cowering man, Aris steps from the blast's shadow and calmly asks whether the noble managed to observe his spell properly. A close-up of the examiner's panicked eye answers with silent dread as Arus's question about getting a good look at his magic hangs like a threat. The grounds fall quiet while an announcer reluctantly declares that examinee number 398, Arus, has officially cleared the first trial. Arus starts to leave the crater when a polished boot intrudes on his path, and a condescending voice greets him as peasant. Wearing a smug, familiar smirk, the noble officer leans in and announces that their unpleasant acquaintance has just begun anew. Arus's calm stare hardens as the announcement that the second test begins hangs in the air like a fresh sentence. He recalls descending into the academy's dark basement, each echoing step drawing him deeper into uncertainty and shadow. The crowd thinned to a mere 100 as survivors filed down the stairs, each one feeling the weight of 300 failures pressing at their backs. Standing among stiff uniforms, he silently notes that the first trial never felt lethal enough to justify so many being cast aside. The mustached officer declares their arrival, while Arus gazes ahead, wary of whatever trap this new stage will spring. The vast underground coliseum yawns open before them, a hidden pit where the academy clearly intends students to bleed for glory, and the tension does not ease. Facing the gathered examinees, the proctor announces a swordsman's trial where they must clash with school-issued weapons, while one boy mutters in disbelief at such brutality buried beneath their feet. Arus listens as weapons are promised and training is challenged, quietly admitting that swordplay is not where his strength truly lies. The examiner's mouth curls as he warns that something must happen first, his tone promising malice rather than simple procedure. Steel flashes as Arus instinctively draws a blade toward the looming man, shocking the onlookers with how quickly coiled tension turns into naked steel. The officer leans over the railing and accuses him of earlier mockery, nursing his wounded pride like a fresh, festering grudge. Surrounded by uniforms, Arus grips his hilt while the man sneers that he is just another half-witted fire mage who trained a single trick into a pathetic show. The officer's steps clack down the stairs as he adds that the boy had better not disgrace himself when that flashy trick is tested. Hemmed in by watching cadets, Arus faces the noble who declares that no commoner on earth is allowed to stand above his kind. The man steps in close, insisting there must never be such a thing, trying to crush defiance with sheer proximity and stale authority. From the roaring stands, the announcer calls out that the matchups will now be revealed, while a quiet thought cuts in that the examiner's belief about Arus could not be more wrong. Arus sits composed as internal narration notes how the man's refusal to bend, even after everything, almost makes his prejudice impressive in its stubbornness. Reading from his clipboard, the examiner orders certain students to step forward, his rigid voice looping from casual cruelty back into cold formality. Arus's expression barely shifts when his number, 398, is called, knowing the arena's full gaze is about to lock onto him again. A faint, curved smile forms on unseen lips as the same voice adds a number 4, hinting that someone dangerous has been paired with him on purpose. Across the arena, Arus faces Deluk as the noble's sugary greeting curdles the air between them into something poisonous. Deluk bares his teeth around his sword hilt, gloating that fate has handed him a swift chance to reclaim his stained honor in front of everyone. The mustached examiner leers downward, savoring the moment he believes this insolent commoner's carefully built facade will finally shatter. Under the black sky of the Colosseum, Arus coolly pieces together that Deluk and the examiner stand on the same corrupt side of this stage. The academy's facade looms, while narration exposes its rotten back door, where bribes buy children the glory others sweat and bleed for. Close-ups of examiner and noble trade off as a grim aside wagers they sealed some secret deal over this duel long before today. Spreading his arms with theatrical delight, the examiner bellows for the duel to begin, hungry for blood disguised as rigorous pedagogy. Deluk lunges in with manic laughter, sword raised high as he howls his promise to crush the peasant without mercy. Fingers tighten around the ornate hilt as Arus notes something off about these supposedly standard school-issued blades. Watching the blunt steel whistle toward him, he calculates that even a dulled weapon can wreck him if he treats this trial lightly. Deluk's face twists with frustration as he screams at the unmoving Arus, demanding to know what is wrong with the peasant just standing there. Unruffled, Arus finally answers with a steady profile, telling him to stop whining and force him to draw for real. Panels slide past Arus's calm eyes as he concedes the provocation worked and, since this is a sword trial, he will unsheath his own. Steel flashes in a tight frame as their bodies close, the first violent clash exploding in jagged motion lines and rattling echoes. From the railing, the examiner's back and curling smile betray smug anticipation that his carefully rigged spectacle is unfolding exactly as planned. His satisfaction falters as he admits Arus dodged the strike, though an unfinished however hints he still trusts the deeper trap. Deluk throws his head back in cruel laughter, mocking the peasant again as if a single dodge only proves cowardice. Arus stands over a snapped blade with mild disdain, remarking that his opponent's metal, steel and spirit both, falls far below standard. Glaring down at the arena, the examiner silently fumes that such a single exchange should never have shattered Deluk's sword so easily. As Deluk charges again, Arus coolly realizes the noble expected this outcome all along, having conspired with the examiner to sabotage his weapon from the start. Arus narrows his eyes and coolly admits the ploy was clever as he begins to reveal the sharper edge he carries. Deluk boasts that he has wielded a blade since childhood while Arus dismissively echoes the age with chilling indifference. A memory of a narrow alley surfaces as Arus recalls being plucked from the streets and forged into an assassin at the same tender age. Deluk snarls that a mere commoner like Arus has no right to stand before him, spitting the word like venom on stone. With a single overwhelming stroke, Arus's attack dwarfs Deluk's reach, proving that their skills cannot even be placed on the same scale. Deluk advances with swagger, jeering if running away is all Arus knows and taunting that his swordsmanship has stolen the boy's courage. Watching him close in, Arus concedes inwardly that the noble has some talent to support at least part of his bragging. Yet his calm gaze hardens as he judges that such pristine textbook form would crumble instantly in a real killing fight. Deluk's mouth twists into unhinged laughter, the sound scraping across the arena like a promise of coming madness. Eyes wide and voice erupting, he screams for Arus to die, vowing to finish him here and now in front of everyone. Deluk's face warps in irritation as he mentally curses how effortlessly this boy grinds on his nerves with every breath. Smirking sideways, he decides this is the perfect chance to reveal something special and make Arus regret provoking him. In the next heartbeat, Arus's broken blade spins through the air, ripping Deluk's weapon away and leaving the noble shocked and defenseless. Sweat beads on Deluk's throat as cold steel kisses his neck, and he can only gasp out a strangled protest. Arus's eyes burn inches away as he explains that this merciless closeness is what it truly means to end a life. Trembling, Deluk swallows hard and forces a crooked smile, promising to never utter such reckless words again now that he understands. As Arus turns his back and walks off, Deluk is left staring after him, shaken to the core by how narrowly he escaped death. Glancing aside, Arus reflects that overwhelming an enemy has never required some magnificent weapon. He knows that even a shattered sword can paralyze most people if they are made to feel genuine killing intent, a truth that makes the watching examiner gulp and the air grow tight. From high above, the announcer declares Deluk unconscious and proclaims Arus the victor of the duel, sealing the noble's humiliation. As the empty arena looms behind him, Arus half turns with a stiff expression, grateful to have survived yet nagged by a quiet unease he cannot name. The mustached examiner forces a strained grin that cannot hide his sweat as he wonders aloud if he himself will really scrape through this ordeal. Above the fading battleground, streaked clouds drift across the sky while narration concedes that, whatever doubts remain, the grueling entrance exams have finally ended.